22 Cans is probably the most controversial game development company in the United Kingdom. When Godus hit Steam Early Access in September of 2013, Peter Molyneux fans were very salty, and rightfully so. Ever since Molyneux left Lionhead and Bullfrog, his company has done very little other than take £500,000 from Kickstarter and shove a remake of Populus into the limelight that no one enjoyed. This video takes a look at the history of Molyneux with Bullfrog and Lionhead in order to discover how we reached this point with 22 Cans. Enjoy! His career started back in the early 80s when he began work on his first game, The Entrepreneur, a text-based business management simulator. Molyneux was convinced that the game would be a huge success, and he financed most of its advertising out of his own pocket. He was wrong, though. The game flopped. However, in one of the luckiest turn of events I've ever read about in gaming, Peter was given free computers to continue working on software. His intention was to retire from game design, so he and Les Edgar started Taurus Impex Limited, a company that exported beans. Hilariously, Commodore International mistook it for Taurus, spelled T-O-R-U-S, a more established software company, and offered to provide Molyneux with 10 free Amiga computers to help in porting his networking software. Molyneux later stated that it suddenly dawned on me that this guy didn't know who we were. I suddenly had this crisis of conscience. I thought, if this guy finds out, there go my free computers down the drain. So I just shook his hand and ran out of the office. He quickly designed a database system for the Amiga called Acquisition, the ultimate database for the Amiga, and he used the money to start Bullfrog in 1987. The first game that he made under the Bullfrog banner was called Druid 2, and he lied to a company called Firebird and told them he was a programmer to get backing for the project. Give Peter Molyneux credit here. He has no problem in lying to ignorant companies in order to funnel finances into his own business. Now, I don't think this sort of thing would happen nowadays, but in the 1980s it was a different time, and I find the idea of Molyneux lying about being a programmer completely hilarious. Afterwards, Bullfrog quickly turned their attention to Populus, one of the first God games ever made and the one that put Molyneux on the map. The game was very successful. It received numerous awards and eventually sold 4 million copies, giving the company the required resources to make the move into other titles. By 1994, the studio had developed Druid 2, Fusion, Populus, Powermonger, Flood, Populus 2, Syndicate, and Theme Park. By 93, Molyneux had already entered into talks with Electronic Arts about a potential buyout, and by January of 95, it was a done deal. He had been an executive at EA for a few months by the time of the buyout, so it was no surprise when EA swooped in to get controlling interest of the company. Molyneux stayed on board for a couple of years, but by 1997 he had more pressing ambitions. After Dungeon Keeper released in 97, Peter was headed out the door to found Lionhead Studios, a decision he made while out drinking with one of his friends who went on to co-found the new studio with him. Nothing like a night of drinking with your buddy to make you want to go quit your job, eh? Who needs EA anyway? In 20 years they'll be using microtransactions and loot boxes on their licensed games just to make a living. The first project Lionhead went to work on was Black and White, another God game that fit well into the reputation that Molyneux had already built for himself with past titles. The game was highly anticipated and it didn't disappoint. Considered one of the best games of the early 2000s, it impressed gamers and critics alike, and went on to sell enough to make Lionhead a few million pounds. After the success of Black and White, Molyneux and company went to work on the first game in the Fable series, which I believe needs no introduction. The Fable games are some of the most famous in gaming history, and they helped define what it meant to be an open-world action RPG. The sequels were even more successful, and this series is perhaps Liongate's proudest achievement. A couple of years after Fable 1's release, Lionhead Studios was acquired by Microsoft, something we've seen frequently in past videos with Obsidian and Double Fine. At E3 2006, Molyneux said fans were going to see a lot more fantastic games from Lionhead because of that relationship. Honestly, he did it for the same reason Fergus and Tim Schafer did it: money. He also got a promotion and worked as the creative director of Microsoft Games' European division. It was a sweet deal for him, but in March of 2012, Molyneux announced that he would be leaving Lionhead and Microsoft after the completion of Fable: The Journey to begin work at 22 Cans, founded by Tim Rance, his Liongate co-founder and the fellow who talked him into quitting EA. Unfortunately, that's where the happy story ends. 22 Cans sucks, and ever since Godus came out, the company has been in a state of disrepair, so much so that Molyneux has refused to even give interviews and has completely shied away from the media ever since. The new CEO, actually, who has taken over there, his name is Simon Phillips, and he took over 22 Cans to try and clean up the mess. He was very direct about the state of the company in an interview he gave back in 2015. He told Molyneux that all that stuff you've done wrong is quite easy stuff to fix, and should have been done, and yes, you f***ed up, and should have done all this stuff, but we can sort that out. You need to get back into designing games. Don't try and do everything. Don't try and glue it all back together because it's just going to crumble down. You need to make games. That's what you enjoy. I quite like the business. I'll do the business. Hopefully he's taken that advice in the past 4 years. 22 Cans is currently working on Legacy, an industrial simulator of some sort that is supposedly inspired directly by 1984's The Entrepreneur. I hope it's good, but I'm not expecting it to be. It feels more like an old dev trying to bring back the old days for one last run. Almost like a curtain call for everything Molyneux achieved in his career. I genuinely hope it's good. Theme Park is still one of my favorite games ever made, and I have a lot of respect for what Peter has accomplished in his career. I also like his unique sense of humor, the stories of pranks back in the Bullfrog days, and his propensity for finding a way to just make things work. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video on Peter Molyneux and the history leading up to the current state of 22 Cans. If you did, be sure to share it on Reddit, Facebook, Twitter, and with everyone you know, because it's the only way we can grow here on YouTube. Be sure to join our Discord if you like talking about and playing games. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one.